Karen and team, are you ready to get started? Perfect. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this morning. We're really excited to have you. I'm really excited to be here as well to listen in and to see lots of new names coming in the chat here, but lots of familiar names too in relation to our multilingual learner program here in South Carolina. So good to be here with everyone. My name is Susan Murphy, and I will be helping to moderate. And on that note, if you could please, just as a friendly reminder, to keep your microphones on throughout the presentation, that would be really helpful. If you have any questions throughout this session as well, please feel free to put those in the chat box, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce one of your presenters today, Karen Utter, who is the project director for Carolina Family Engagement Center. Ms. Utter has served as CFEC's project director since its inception on October 1st in 2018. She is also the associate director of the South Carolina School Improvement Council, located in the College of Education at the University of South Carolina, where she has held various roles since 2010. Ms. Utter has served as a catalyst for family engagement initiatives throughout South Carolina. She brings a wealth of experience working directly with district and school administrators, teachers, and families, while providing capacity building training and technical assistance in family engagement and the effective operation of local school improvement councils. She also has developed materials, website content, and initiatives for all types of education stakeholders. Karen holds the JD degree from the American University's Washington College of Law in Washington, D.C., and practiced law in the nation's capital for over 15 years prior to moving to South Carolina. And over to you, Karen. And Karen, you may.
Thank you so much. I forgot to unmute. Thank you so much, Susan, for that introduction. And I'm so happy to be here with everyone today. Again, feel free at any time to interrupt us with questions, or if for any reason you can't hear me or any of my colleagues, just let us know. So I want to briefly introduce my two colleagues who are presenting with me here today, Mike Young and Lydia Carnesale. Mike is coming to us he's the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for the Center for Community Health Alignment and PASOs. And Lydia is the Bilingual Learning Engagement Coordinator in the Office of Early Learning and Literacy at the South Carolina Department of Education, as well as a doctoral student at the University of South Carolina, here at the College of Education. And I just want to say both Mike and Lydia work tirelessly across the state to create more equitable opportunities. Mike in public health primarily, and Lydia primarily in education for all of our children. They are trusted leaders in the Latino community, and they've been so generous to organizations like Carolina Family Engagement Center in helping us make authentic connections with Latino parents. And it's a real honor to be here today presenting with them. So I just wanted to acknowledge them and their great work. So the other piece of information before we start, we have a part 2 to this presentation that I believe will be in the same room after we finish, and I hope you'll all stay to hear that. That's going to be with Angela Rush. She's the Director of Translation and Interpretation at the Charleston County Schools, and she's going to bring a wealth of information about Charleston's journey in terms of developing systems for providing language assistance in their district. So with no further ado, we'll go to the opening slide. So I'm going to give you just a brief introduction to our objectives for today's session. First, basically, we wanted to increase awareness, and we're talking about communication today. And so I'm going to be the brief opener, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about the translation interpretation requirements that arise from federal civil rights laws, and some options for providing those services. And then Mike is going to take over and talk about bridging cultural differences that impact how communications are understood. And finally, Lydia is going to close talking about the importance of providing all school personnel with professional development to build understanding of what it's like to be a multilingual parent, whether you're Spanish speaking or whichever language you speak. We're going to focus on Spanish speaking families today, but much of this applies to parents who speak another language other than English, not just Spanish. The reason we wanted to pull these pieces together was because, yes, communication is about speaking the same language, but there are other components to communication that it's really important to be aware of when you're wanting to be strategic and effective in engaging families who do not speak English as their first language. Okay. So next slide. So I just wanted to briefly tie all this into the South Carolina's official family engagement K-12 framework. Many of you have probably already seen this in other contexts. I always like to bring it up because I'm a really strong proponent of wanting to promote the use of this throughout South Carolina. It's a great framework. And today obviously it sets forth what the State Department has identified as the 5 key components of effective family engagement, and communication being one of those. And today, I think the important thought from this framework to take away is that we can't do any of the other family engagement work without that communication piece. So you can't build a trusting relationship with another parent of any language without communication. You can't collaborate with a parent around an IEP plan without communication. You can't link to learning and development without communication. So before we get anywhere in family engagement, we really need to focus on that communication piece and make sure that it's effective. Okay, Mike, next slide. So the federal courts have recognized, I think, the importance of family engagement in the way that they have interpreted the federal civil rights laws regarding the importance of translating information for parents. There are, as many of you are probably aware, there are other laws that also contain requirements about translating school information for parents, but today we're just talking about the federal civil rights laws. And the heart of it is, and I've taken this quote from a fact sheet, that if you don't have it and you're working in family engagement, you ought to have it. And I've put the link here. This is basically the best summary I've been able to find of what's required of districts and schools in terms of making sure that parents have, and not just Spanish speaking, but any family that is not proficient in English has access to the information they need to support their child's education. So schools must communicate information to limited English proficient parents. You may see that term LEP. I think we're transitioning and trying to take an asset-based approach to multilingual parents. But that's the way it's written in the law right now, is limited English proficient parents in a language that they can understand about any program, service, or activity that is called to the attention of parents who are proficient in English. Okay, so it's not an option. It's not something nice that we do when we have time or when we have the funds to do it. It's true that there's not there may not be a designated funding stream for certain types of translation, but it's something that is required. It's not an option. And thanks, Lydia, for putting that in the chat for me, because I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. Okay, next slide, Mike. Okay, so understanding that it's a requirement, and it's a requirement to get us where we want to go in family engagement, what are some common ways of providing language assistance? So I know that in talking with focus groups of families and talking to just people in the field generally over the years, a lot of times folks are relying on students and children, including children of the parents for whom they're translating. Or they're relying on their bilingual staff. And that's understandable. And if there's an emergency, of course, we have to do what we have to do, but that is not what is going to find you in compliance with federal civil rights laws. It has to be translated by someone who's considered to be qualified, which means they must be trained to be a translator. They can't just be someone who has a certain level of bilingual capability. There are other issues regarding privacy and confidentiality and terminology that may come into play, particularly when we're speaking about special ed, that require that we have a qualified translator available. And whether that person is in person or on the phone or is virtual depends on the situation. But I've tried to give you a few ideas here because one of the common things I hear are A, we don't have enough money in budget for this, and B, we don't know where to find qualified translators. So there are vendors who can provide that service. And I did discover, and I will put this in the chat as soon as I am finished, there is a document that the State Department Title III office issued. It was updated in 2022. It's called English to Speakers of Other Languages, Guiding Principles. And they do have a list of possible vendors. And there's no endorsement of any particular vendor, obviously, but it does give you a place to start. And I'll put that link in the chat for you all. And then another option is the phone option. There are companies that provide, oh, thank you, Susan. There are companies that provide, and that's on page 23 through 25, if anyone's looking that up. There you'll find the list both of certification programs that the State Department is aware of and vendors. So some of those are phone interpretation services. So that can be especially valuable for folks in the front office if they have someone come in and an in-person interpreter is not readily available, to be able to pick up the phone and at least get enough information to direct that person to the help that they need. Technology has advanced leaps and bounds, I think, since the pandemic in terms of providing simultaneous interpretation using Zoom. You can have a language channel on your Zoom where if you're having a big parent event, you can have a translator on the Zoom meeting, and parents who want to hear the presentation, for example, in Spanish, can click onto a Spanish language channel. They still see the English language presenter. They're still part of the program, but it's just like at the UN when they have, or the setup where you have headsets on, you have a physical person there, only it's virtual. And it's as far as I can tell, if you have a Zoom subscription, you don't have to pay anything extra for that. And then there are the apps and platforms that provide translation. Some are better than others. I know WhatsApp is a big app for folks in the Latino community in terms of what they'd like to use. So those are some suggestions. Okay, Mike. And this is my final slide. I want to save most of my time for Mike and Lydia. But, and again, if you attend the next session, the focus will really be on that translation interpretation piece. But I just wanted to see what folks think in terms of what types of parent information must be provided to families. So when I read one of these off, just raise your hand virtually if you think this is something that your district needs to be providing in terms of in a language that parents can understand. So report cards. Do report cards? And yes, I will list the apps in the chat. Report cards, do they need to be provided in language parents understand? I'm seeing yes, and that's the ding, 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 that's the correct answer. Report cards, very important. Parents can't monitor their child's progress without report cards, and making sure that if you are providing those report cards on an electronic platform, that there is a function to translate those. Parent permission forms, required to translate, yes or no? Yes, 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 I'm seeing again, yes, excellent. Yes, those are also required. Parent-teacher conferences. I'm seeing nods and more yeses. Yes. And in fact, for parent-teacher conferences, that's one of those contexts where I think it's very important, if possible, to have someone who has the capacity to be there in person. And I saw the comment, anything that goes home from the school district to a parent, and that really is correct. The information about gifted and talented program, again, is another one that, yes, I find I listed these because I find that sometimes folks don't take a very narrow view of what they are required to translate. But really, it's whatever's required for the school to have meaningful dialogue and conversation with that parent, and for the parent to be able to meaningfully engage in their children's education. And that can encompass a broad range of things. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike and let him take it away.
All right, thanks, Karen. Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Mike. I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for the Center for Community Health Alignment, and PASOs is one of the plants that grow out of our flower pot. And I've been working with PASOs since 2016. And my role there was the Director of Capacity Building. So I worked with organizations and partners to kind of understand the culture, connect with communities, and just come up with better ways to connect and engage and meet people where they are, and have effective strategies that definitely generate trust, because we know relationship building is important. Can somebody mute? Let's see. Do I have control to do that? I think. Got it. All right. And so one of the projects that we did, which I'm going to be sharing right here, was a video that Medicaid contracted us to make, and they use it for training all their employees about kind of cultural nuance and history and understanding. And what's interesting too is that there was a portion in there that they had me spell out how to use telelanguage, one of their language service that they used at the time. It was interesting that was my role, because I mean, I didn't even know telelanguage, but so I understand telelanguage now, but I took that part out because it's not applicable anymore. But this thing goes over a lot of the main points that people like to know about the community and the identity. So here we go.
What are some of the ways we can better serve our Latino and Hispanic neighbors? This video has been designed to help clarify the difference between terms like Hispanic and Latino, and provide useful examples for culturally appropriate ways to better serve Latino and Hispanic individuals. So who is Hispanic and who is Latino? Hispanic is a linguistic term that applies to those who speak Spanish. The Spanish language originated in Spain, but spread during the 1500s as Spanish explorers colonized most of Central America, South America, and much of North America's western coast. The New World, as it was called then, was neither empty nor new. There were people there, with languages of their own and cultures specific to their areas. This means different foods grown in different environments, climates, architecture, social norms, beliefs, societal structures, and ways of being. As a result, there are currently indigenous cultures and communities throughout what we call Latin America that are bilingual, speaking Spanish and their indigenous language, and some who solely speak an indigenous language. For example, in Guatemala alone, there are 21 nationally recognized indigenous languages. In Brazil, the largest country in Latin America, the national language is Portuguese, not Spanish. To add another layer of complexity, people from all over the world settled in this part of the Western Hemisphere over the course of the last 500 years, bringing their language and cultural influences with them as well. With all of this in mind, Hispanic, with its definition being Spanish-speaking, doesn't work for everyone throughout Latin America. Latino is a term meaning anyone from Latin America, spanning across language, race, and identity. Fifth-generation Italian immigrants from Argentina are Latino, just as their Aztec-descendant Mexican neighbors to the north are. Latinos have a long history as part of the culture and fabric of the United States. In 1848, Mexico ceded large portions of their land to the United States with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and the Gadsden Purchase of 1853. People living in the areas that are now Texas, Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming went from being Mexican to American with the signing of this treaty. Additionally, the United States has claimed other Latin American territories, such as Puerto Rico, extending U.S. citizenship to them as well in 1917. There are over 50 million Latinos in the United States, making them the largest minority group, representing about 18% of United States' total population. It is predicted that this number will grow to 30% by 2060. For the last 10 years, South Carolina has been in the top 5 states with the fastest growing Latino population. Across South Carolina, there are over 270,000. South Carolina has seen a 900% increase in the Latino child population. Currently, that growth is fueled by birth. According to the New American Economy August 2016 report, Latinos in South Carolina paid $345.6 million in taxes. That's $230.7 million federal and $114.9 million state and local. The United States is made up of individuals that belong to a wide range of races, religions, genders, disabilities, national origins, and ages. Individuals who have limited ability to read, write, speak, or understand English are considered to be limited English proficient individuals. Discrimination against an individual because of the limited ability to use the English language is a form of national origin discrimination, which is prohibited by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Here are some additional tips on working with Latino individuals. Remember that there is a lot of diversity within the Latino population. Be careful not to make assumptions about language proficiency levels, country of origin, or documentation status. Latinos value relationships. Shake hands and greet them by name or ask what they prefer to be called. Eye contact with people of authority may be avoided as a sign of respect. When a Latino person nods their head, it does not necessarily signify agreement. It may also signify that the person is listening to you. Silence can often signify not understanding or disagreement. To ensure understanding, ask open-ended questions and encourage them to ask questions. Because the family is an important source of emotional support, customers may like to have their family members present during an interview. Latino immigrants tend to be more relaxed with time. It is important to begin any meeting with an informal and relaxed exchange of personal or family information before beginning to work on tasks related to the meeting's purpose. Just as with all customers, provide information in a courteous manner and listen attentively. Thank you for watching this video presentation, and we hope this information will help you better serve South Carolina's Latino families. For more information, please visit www.scpasos.org.
All right. So some of the takeaways that I want to kind of just reiterate from that video. The terms, people really get hung up on terms, you know, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latine. And the thing is just ask people what term they prefer. You know, typically these are terms that don't get used in their countries of origin. They're terms that get used once they arrive. So it's kind of just a personal choice, you know, and they have different impacts, right? So just asking, you know, don't assume, that's important. And kind of just know a little bit about the different terms, you know, so dig around and understand why they exist. In our longer trainings, we definitely explain the use of Latinx and Latine and what kind of what it all is, but you know, we don't have time for that right now. But anyways, relationship building is super duper important. It's all about making connections and spending a little bit of time, you know, making people feel comfortable, because there is a heightened sense of anxiety in our communities, and that sense of belonging needs to be really like made prominent. You know, people really want to feel like they're seen and welcome. So chatting a little bit, you know, making a personal connection is very valuable to kind of generate that trust. And, you know, families come along. Families might be there with their parents and relatives, you know, that might happen. Just be kind of ready for that. And yeah, so communication is different. It's not just communication in verbal form, like body language is important. But even that, like I said, time being spent with the family, that's communicating. That's communicating that I value you and I see you and I'm here to work with you at your pace. You know, being rushed is always kind of felt by the community because it's a lot more slower pace when it comes to like moving along and things like that. See here, misunderstanding. Yeah, just knowing that different words have different meanings and using children to interpret is not good. It's not right, it's illegal. And and some things happen. For example, Julie, our founder, told a story about a pregnant woman with bringing her daughter to her OB appointment, and the little girl was maybe 6, and it was a dentist appointment, and the dentist said, if you get bacteria in your gum, if you get a certain type of bacteria in your gums, it might affect your pregnancy. And the little girl said, if you get, in Spanish, if you get bacteria in your chicle, it's going to affect your baby. And chicle is the word for gum in Spanish, but chewing gum, right? So just those kinds of things can happen. So that could be dangerous. Let's see here. And different words mean different things in different countries. So like when you check for translations, have people from a variety of countries check it out. We have about 12 different countries represented on our staff. And we have like 2 reviewers of most of our documents and things like that. All right, so these are some of the areas that we like to point out about kind of how things are functioning in the community and how it's perceived a little bit too. So like the priorities of our families is obviously making sure that they're taken care of. So work is a big priority, education is a big priority. A lot of families send money back home. They want to make sure that they're supporting their families. So sometimes that reduces time and availability. And not only that, there's this sort of like deference to authority, like teachers especially. Our communities tend to not push back as much on teachers as a lot of, American parents do, because it's kind of a cultural thing, right? To kind of just stand up for your kid. And in Latin America, it's very much the teachers are the say so, and whatever they say goes. And also because of that time management, sometimes they can't make it to parent teacher meetings or PTAs, or they just don't feel welcome, or like that's their place. So taking that extra step to make sure that they are welcomed and invited and acknowledged, right? Like when they show up, make sure that they get engaged in some way or another. That'll make them return. But it oftentimes gets interpreted as them not being involved or not caring about their kids' education, which is definitely not the case. So just pointing out communication there. So when we screen children for developmental delays and things like that, these are some of the things that could happen. Sometimes the parents ignore things. They don't realize that they're issues. So these kinds of things need to be communicated, that they don't realize that they're not listening, or, the behavioral things. So we help them understand what can be a resource, what kind of connections to enhance that kind of that development and growth of their children. And CFEC is also a great resource for that, because they're dialed into all the networks of organizations out there that are providing support for our families. And yeah, during this recent COVID, that added stress, right? So mental health is an issue. Employment, all these kinds of things are impacting the community as well. And having to jump to technology is another layer of language proficiency and technological savviness that everybody has had to kind of adapt to. So just knowing that these kinds of barriers are even larger for community members who already might not speak the language and don't know how to navigate some of these systems. So being patient. Some of the areas that impact our communities as well. These are what we call the social determinants of health. So in public health, we know that health isn't just about being sick or being prone to sickness. It's about the environment and all the stressors that impact your ability to thrive and access things and eat well and travel and all those kinds of things. So these are some of the ones that are specific to our community that require that equitable approach, that tailored attention and energy based on the needs and strengths of the community. So knowing that language proficiency is a barrier that some families are dealing with, you know, that patience and making sure the materials and tools are available and resources, you know, and having staff trained in those tools. So just having a folder in with all the documents in it, if nobody knows how to use them, that's not going to be helpful. And also hiring bilingual staff. But another key thing about hiring bilingual staff is that you got to make sure that that bilingual staff has the right qualities to interact with the community, because just because they're bilingual doesn't guarantee they're qualified in terms of like relationship building, because that's what those people need. They need to feel comfortable, and not all bilingual people are people, you know, and so you got to make sure you have the nice, kind-hearted ones that are here to help, you know, their fellow community members. So there's high rates of illiteracy. Poverty is an issue, and I'll show you a statistic in the next slide. And I have a resource for you in the next slide to show you county by county all the different statistics that you can use to show leadership and show what's going on in your particular counties, to demonstrate what are the needs and where you can start focusing depending on what your different resources are. Insurance, you know, confusing systems, right? Knowing how to navigate our systems. That's what PASOs is all about. We're here to walk people through the complicated systems because they come from the community that they serve. A lot of our team members were participants in our programs, and then we saw that spark in them and we nurtured it and made roles for them, and they navigate their community members. Transportation is an issue. All of these things impact health, by the way, you know, so it makes people have a harder time getting to work, accessing food if they live in rural areas. Fear and discrimination, there's a whole lot of anti-immigration sentiment as a whole. So feeling that threat of discrimination and being targeted, and if you don't have documentation, there's always an extra threat of potentially losing parents or family members. And yeah, so those are all the anti-immigrant policies and stress and family separation. So this is a resource that I want to share with you guys. This is my last slide. The disparities are real. 37% of Latino children live in poverty compared to 23% of all South Carolina children. So that clearly shows that if we want to see all of our communities doing well, we're going to have to apply extra energy to boost up all the children. And it's growing. We have the third fastest growing Latino population nationwide. So that's the future, right? And we're part of the community. So making sure that our children are all taken care of is going to take a little bit of extra effort to connect with these families and make sure that their children do well. If you scan this QR code with your phone, turn your camera on and scan it, it'll take you to Salute America County Report Card. You can pick any state, any county, and it'll break down all these various factors and give you statistics. And you can print them out in a PDF form. I'm giving a presentation in Oconee tomorrow, and I just updated my stats. Previously, the children in poverty in Oconee County was like 59% in Latino children. And I just checked again, and now it's down to 42%. So that's pretty exciting to see a reduction in that. But it goes over income, high school graduation rate, insured, birth rates, mortality rates, all those kinds of things. So it's a very useful tool, and please use it and share it. All right, thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Lydia.
Gracias and thank you. Good morning and buenos dias to everybody. I'm very glad to be here and in collaboration with my colleagues. So as we have presented this morning, as the information has been given to you this morning, I'd like you to take a moment and just kind of reflect upon everything that's already been said, and then ask yourself the following questions. And some of these perhaps you can relate to at a multilingual level and perhaps not, but regardless, just taking a moment to think about a time that you felt helpless using language, really just the inability to communicate. And then take about 2 seconds to think about that. I know that's not a lot of time. And then counter that and think about a time when you felt powerful using language. When is the time that you've known you had the upper hand and the control just by utilizing language? And then when you stop and you put those two together, think about scenarios that impact and relate to families that we are serving. When we consider those two components, feeling helpless and feeling powerful on either end of that spectrum, how does that impact the families and children that we're serving? Next slide. So something that we've come up with, myself and CFAC, as we have confronted the barriers, right, of language and understanding the community, we developed what we call language simulations, very akin to the poverty simulations, if you will, where we've created authentic language experiences for staff, educators, students, families even, but to understand what is language, to feel that helplessness and also that power when we consider language. The idea in constructing these language simulations is to be able to create a safe space to talk about language. What is it to us? Where does it lay? How do we view it? What is our understanding of multilingualism, culture as connected to language, and how do we practice it as a whole? And then flipping our own understanding and reflection and putting it in through the eyes and lens of families. And then at the end of these simulations, we're providing resources and strategies to districts, schools, faculty, and staff so that they can take what they learn, they can incorporate it, and then better serve the families that we're interacting with statewide. So why? Why is this important? These engagements are important because when you consider that children as young as 2.5 to 3 years old become aware and begin to take socially prevailing ideas, feelings, and stereotypes about people and themselves that early, and they're entering our educational spaces and early childhood programs, if we are not engaging them and meeting them where they are as confident language users, utilizing their natural resources, if we're not engaging these families as their children's first teachers, right? If we're dismissing them or dismissing the language they hold, that's what these small children are taking in from the very beginning. The child's interaction with their teachers, with other children, the community, the media, the caregivers are inevitably shaping their perception of their world, their judgment of others. If they understand and get stripped of their language and their culture from a very young age, what is going to be the judgment of the family around them that perhaps does not speak English? Because they will be inundated in English at a very young age and navigating the educational system. But what are we giving them as they are being educated, and what are we taking away? So young children have the intellectual capacity for undoing any pre-existing unfair perception of others, right? Through meaningful and culturally responsive experiences. So it's our job to give them to them from the beginning. And I always start with early childhood because that's the realm that I work within. So please take this as you will for the ages that you are interacting with. But from my lens, it's that understanding that early childhood is a foundational period, both with language development, but also in that social emotional growth. And then 80% of students who enter into school as the language learners will lose, or multilinguals, emergent bilinguals, whichever label you choose to give, will lose their productive ability in their first language by the time they enter high school. And then as they're graduating high school, we're having that expectation of, hey, you're going to be a global entrepreneur. But yet we've stripped you of your entire language and your confidence to be a language user and cultural being in your community. But please come be that bilingual for us when you graduate. And when you can no longer speak your home language, even if you understand it, you've lost it. So imagine there's a video that I showed, and I don't have it here for time, but it's a video of a Vietnamese young woman who wanted to see her grandmother who was dying in the hospital. And she said that she could understand everything she said, but that she could not tell her what she felt anymore. And it was so helpless that she could not impart the feeling and memories of her grandmother at this point in her life. Next slide. So construyendo enlaces. So why is it important to make these bridges? Why as schools and classrooms, how do we do this? We build relationships that celebrate students' culture and unique backgrounds. We honor them and acknowledge where they come from. We take language and interaction within the classroom with language-rich learning environments. What is the print material that we have? What are we providing? Are we aware of the languages present? Are we asking parents, especially in early childhood, but across the age span, Please share with us pieces of your language and culture so we can intertwine it with the curriculum that we're giving it. And then utilizing culturally relevant materials and literature as we're moving through. Considerando messages in the communities. As we are honoring and acknowledging in the classroom, how are we then going back into the community? It was already spoken to about building these relationships from the beginning. How are we weaving home and school education, honoring home practices, though they don't look like what we're doing academically? How are we honoring them and saying that's still a capacity and skill set that we can tie into the curriculum we already have? How are we honoring the assets and empowering families and connecting with the resources that they have, saying you're still an important part of your children's life, and we want to engage and know what you know, so that that can be brought into your child's educational experience and tied to curriculum and learning, so that they have éxito, success in the end. And then varying activities and opportunities. So where are we meeting these families? Are we providing multiple times, multiple platforms, and knowing what times are available to come and participate in activities so they aren't seen as disengaged? And then knowing the challenges that they face. Where does the fear lie? Where do they find themselves safe? How are they arriving or not arriving to the school? If those children are only and solely using those bus transportation systems because they don't have a vehicle, how are we meeting the families where they are within their communities?
Lydia, you have about 4 to 5 minutes left.
Yep, that's it. I'm just about the end.
Oh.
So al final, what new appreciations do you have when we're considering language and family engagement? What I gave was a very brief synopsis, a very broad highlight of a little bit of the work that we're doing. Myself personally at a statewide level, trying to engage as many families that I can within their home language and presenting what do early literacy practices look like? How can we engage with our educators? And then going around and again, speaking to staff and administration on how are we or you engaging the families that you are serving. So that's what I have.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on what Lydia was saying. So we've been at CFAC, at Carolina Family Engagement Center, we've been working with Lydia to develop this professional development opportunity that we're hoping, we're piloting right now, but we are hoping that districts will take advantage of, particularly for their front office staff, for other professional staff, folks who may not necessarily always participate in professional development opportunities. But when it comes to family engagement, we know that that's everybody in the school's job. Anyone who comes and interfaces with parents. And I've heard so many stories of situations where a family who does not speak English comes to the front office, and oftentimes that front office staff, whether they're answering the phone or whether they're in person, they are the first line of communication with families. And if that doesn't go well, if those front office staff or whoever the folks are who are that first point of contact are not open and empathetic in terms of engaging those families, understanding, for example, what the rules are about interpretation and translation. I hear numerous stories about, front office staff who have turned folks away because they just don't even know what the requirements are. So, that strategy of training, providing that professional development, and then Lydia's professional development is really focusing on developing that sense of empathy, that sense of how can we put ourselves in the shoes of a family that's coming to a school to try to communicate about their child and how important that is to them, and what does that feel like when nobody understands, and in the hope that will help people to challenge some of their assumptions about Latino families or families that don't speak English in general, challenge those assumptions and really help them to motivate them to, if they don't know, to learn, to ask for that professional development, to ask for that training, and to learn more about Latino families in general, to know who it is that they're interacting with, and to be a powerful tool for building relationships, you know, as that first point of contact with the school. So hopefully that will be something that we can offer to y'all going forward in the next year or so. So are there any questions or any comments? I know there have been quite a lot of comments in the chat. I think the thing that we just really wanted in general for everyone to walk away with is, yes, that translation interpretation piece is absolutely essential. You can't get anywhere without it, but it's about more than just translation interpretation. It's about knowing the culture and the context of the folks that you're talking to. And it's about empathy, and it's about understanding, and it's about patience. In terms of, those are really strategies that may not be necessarily the first lines. You know, they're not simple. They're not like, you can't just snap them out. They take time, they take effort, they take support from across the board, across the district and schools, but they will pay enormous benefits. So I'll leave it with that. Lydia and Mike, if you have any final, you know, takeaways that you wanted to share.
I just wanted to mention, I really appreciated Lydia bringing up the language struggle of losing that portion of yourself, you know, because I definitely resonate with that. But I put a poem in the chat of a poet talking about that particular phenomenon, and he struggles with it, but he does it in such a powerful way. I recommend watching it. It's only like 3 minutes, so enjoy that too.
And then the only takeaway that I would give, or the last comment, if you will, is that please, you know, reach out if you want resources or assistance with families or staff. I think part of our collaboration and presenting today is to let you all know that we are here as a resource for you.
Yeah, all of us. Yes, absolutely. Like PASOs is kind of like, if you need something, we might not do it, but we know somebody that does. So
Yeah, I think that's all of us. That's our mission, is to be connectors. So yeah. And we'll turn it back over to Susan. I think we're ready to close that, unless anyone has any other questions.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining. And I think after this, you guys are going to your next breakout session. Or if you are thinking and staying for part 2, then I believe that will be in the same room here, starting at about 11 o'clock. So thank you all.
Thank you.